familial. It has to do with the families. Monkeys showed up 40 million years ago, right near the very beginning of this cycle. And what monkeys did is they brought along a consciousness, the consciousness of stimulus, individual response. Individual response. Down here we had hives and nests and swarms and schools and herds and flocks. And you've seen enough wildlife to know if you startle them, the whole herd, boom, off like a shot, right? The whole school of fish, the whole pile of ants. It's all stimulus response, everybody goes. In this case, though, in these stages, each one of them 3.2 million years long, the monkeys and their ancestors and their ancestors and their ancestors built the concept of family. What's the difference between a family and a herd? The recognition of the individual. And it is definitely a survival tool. You're much more flexible as an individual, much more choice of how to survive rather than being one of the pack. Right now, I dare say, in our societies and world, there are a lot of people who would have you give up your individuality. Get in line, sit down, shut up, and become one of the pack. Don't do it. Creation has invested a lot into you attaining your individuality. Don't throw it away. Thanks. Okay, 2 million years ago, we started a new cycle. This is called the tribal cycle. Not so coincidentally, 2 million years ago, right at this line, Australopithecus showed up, the first tailless ape. A really distant ancestor of ours. But as we came through all these 13 stages, we went further and further toward Homo erectus and then Homo sapien, which showed up 160,000 years ago. Each one of these is 160,000 years. So 160,000 years ago was the beginning of this seventh day, and that is when Homo sapien showed up. We are on a schedule. Now, this whole cycle was producing a certain kind of consciousness or a tool for survival, and that was similarities and differences. The mind. Here, we put down the tail and picked up the mind as a survival tool. The tail was a very useful survival tool down here. Down here, fangs and claws were good. But here, the tail, here, the mind. And the mind is a tool to look or notice the similarities and differences in things and in circumstances. Not to just react, but to decide. Okay? To decide. Much more powerful tool for survival. Then, 102,000 years ago, we started another cycle, the cultural cycle. This cultural cycle, had its own brand of consciousness. And this brand of consciousness was reasons. Now, it started off in the caves, way back here, 102,000 years ago. People huddled around the fire in front of the cave. And one guy, who eventually would become called the shaman, he came up with the reasons for things. He came up with the reason for rain, the reason for stars, the reason for the moon, the reason for fire. He had the reasons. If you really, really look at it, the basis of culture is shared reasons. Like an Islamic person, the reason he lives is for Allah. A Christian, he lives for Christ. That's his reason. The foundation of all cultures is shared reasons for things. And what happened here is these cycles, each one of these different divisions, each of them being almost, I'm rounding it up, but they're almost 8,000 years for each one of these days or nights. What happened way over here, 8,000 years ago, we developed agriculture. Agriculture. Well, there have been lots of them, actually, along the way. So, here we are, next cycle. 3115 BC is when this one started. It's called the national cycle, because the modern nation was produced from this consciousness. Each one of these steps or stages is 397, almost 400 years. 3115 BC, by the way, is when we learn to write. So all of this is her story, and from here on up, it's his story. Also, right on this line, right on that line, is when King Minos of the Upper and Lower Nile cultures married the two cultures into the first nation called Egypt. Right there. And ever since then, there has been this evolution of the concept of nations, borders, tariffs, armies. Law. Law. This whole consciousness was about law. And if you have studied the Hebrew Bible, this 3115 BC date is awfully close to when the Hebrew Bible states Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden and into the consciousness of right and wrong, crime and punishment. You see, down here, there wasn't right or wrong. There was just reasons. There was reasons for things. There were certainly consequences for your actions. They happened for reasons. But there wasn't a law. There wasn't some guy going to come and beat your head in. You know? It was natural happenstances and natural consequences, rather than human-imposed sanctions. That started right there.